Welcome to You Don't Know Vietnam, the show that demystifies Vietnam for global audiences by talking to the creatives, trendsetters and business owners who are taking on the market. Vietnam isn't all rice paddies and buffaloes, you know, as you're about to find out. I'm Ian Paynton, co-founder of We Create Content, and on this episode of You Don't Know Vietnam, I'm talking to Hanoi Rock City's Duc Anh, or DA as most people know him. DA and Hanoi Rock City have been giving musicians in Vietnam a platform for 12 years. It's an absolute institution that DA has proudly kept alive despite the financial difficulties associated with running such grassroots endeavours. Today, he talks about how Hanoi Rock City has changed throughout the years, the newfound success of indie bands in Vietnam, and what his dream is for Vietnam's wealth of talented musicians. DAI.
Hello, EP.
Welcome.
Yeah.
No one knows me as EP.
I know. Am I the only one calling you EP nowadays?
Probably.
Yeah.
That was my DJ name back in the day.
I know, it's way too long.
Yeah. It's been a while since I've seen you. The last time I saw you was at the Hanoi Rock City 12th birthday.
Yes. Oh, my days.
12 years. Congratulations.
Bloody hell. Oh, thank you, man. It's crazy.
How did that happen?
I don't know. My student tells me that my school is the biggest sponsor of HRC. I would agree. Because without a proper job, then I don't think it would last that long. I know.
Well, it's been an institution in Hanoi and Vietnam for live music.
Hopefully, yeah.
You know, as long as I've been in Vietnam. And yeah, I mean, did you expect for it to last this long when you set it up?
Definitely not the expectation. The plan was, because basically it's an art, music, culture venue hub for the young kids to create and perform. So it does have a very sort of long intention to it. It's not like a bar you open to make a quick buck and then make some money and, change the places and change the decoration and whatnot. It was built to offer a stage for the young people to create and perform. So it does have a very sort of long expectation to it, but we were all 26, did not have a proper job, came back from the UK, and somehow had a dream together, and we put it up, but definitely without proper financial and strategic planning. So that's why after 2 years, I realized that it makes bare minimum and keeps the place alive. And I will give a lot of credit to the expat scene, because without the expat, the Vietnamese scene would not have a place to perform they do today. Because the first 6 years, we've been here 13 years, and the numbers of people has been changing. In the beginning, it was mostly expats, and the Vietnamese who were there, mainly alumni who went abroad as well, because that place, that feeling, that vibe is not what Vietnamese people are used to.
Right.
So there were mainly expat, but after 6 years, the transition, it's unbelievable. I mean, I saw it happen. And coming from, let's say, 80 expat, 20 Vietnamese, and it's now the opposite, 80 Vietnamese and 20 expat in 13 years. So the first half was like expat keeping the place alive while I'm supporting the Vietnamese music scene. Right. And then now the Vietnamese scene are the dominant part now.
Which is awesome to see, isn't it? Absolutely. So what was it that the Vietnamese were not used to with regards to Hanoi Rock City that foreigners were? Where did the inspiration come from Hanoi Rock City? I guess it was your time in the UK. And what was so different about it compared to what was available in Vietnam at the time?
First of all, the place we have, when we came back, the experience from the UK, we played from dingy basement indie venue. So basically, the first floor of Hanoi Rock City, the stage is what we were looking for. we want a mosh pit. That's it, a stage in a mosh pit. So people can run around, listen to good music, done. The ground floor, the courtyard, is an absolute bonus when we found the place, which we sort of built it like an English pub, you know what I mean? People sit outside on those benches, have beers in the, Sunday morning and whatnot. But it's completely different than what the Vietnamese were experienced before, because for Vietnamese to listen to music before, there were two ways. One, you go to huge places, opera house, stadiums, theater, loads of money. Or you go into a coffee house where people play cover music, and the music were there most of the time is to accommodate people with the drinks. And, it's not about original music, mostly covers. So when I open HRC and there's, to be fair, the expat jumps on right away. They're like, yay, we have a mosh pit, we have a stage with proper equipment and backline and monitors. And that's also scared the Vietnamese away a little. It's like, oh, this is a day place. And they'd be like, oh, that's different. And then the experience is you don't have sitting plans. You don't have tables and chairs. You run around and you go to a bar, you buy your own drink, you hold it in your hand, you run around, you drink it. Which is rarely the case with Vietnamese people before. You have table, you have chairs, you have people come to you and you order, they bring you stuff, you sit there, you listen to music and you go home. But running around like lunatics is while drinking your beers and having fun is not what we used to. So I think that was the biggest difference. But the Vietnamese are catching on now, and they are moshing every week.
Yeah. And would you say the music's changed in Hanoi Rock City over the years?
Definitely.
Because you used to put on a bit of everything. Obviously, Hanoi Rock City, it's in the name, but you're having like drum and bass, electronic music.
Yeah.
Is that still happening at Hanoi Rock City, or is it live music?
It's to be fair, it's because of the noises.
Right.
Because people who listen to electronic music, right? They don't go out early. Nobody goes out to listen to drum and bass at 8, 9 p.m. And I have to cut down because of the neighbors' complaint, which they loves me and they respect me, and so do I, respecting them. But having my respected neighbors calling me and say, yo, last night was too noisy, I couldn't sleep, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. And I was getting to the point of my life that I was getting old as well. When you pass 35 and you have to stay at the venue until 2, 3 a.m., that's very exhausting. So I make a very, very difficult decision. It was 2016. I was like, we are not opening after 12 anymore. And if we have to close because we make not enough money to stay alive, then so be it, because 6 years is enough. But I cannot stay here until 1, 2 a.m. and I cannot taking neighbors' call anymore because of, like I would love to have electronic rave from 8 to 12, but who does that? Like people go out at like 11 earliest.
Well, I feel like it's changing in the UK right now. People are doing like day raves. I think after COVID everyone wants
that'd be awesome.
Be home,
you know what I mean? That's brilliant.
There's something to be explored there.
Maybe.
But I do remember that time when all of a sudden Hanoi Rock City was no longer a late venue.
I
remember it well. And I think maybe the music's changed because of that. Which I think is great.
And the music genre, to be fair, it's most 99% of them are live. So whatever you do there, it's live. It's not like pre-recorded DJ set or anything as it's sometime before. So the live music genre is also been very diverse and super exciting. But it has to be something that I can close at 11:30.
So tell me about the sort of bands that are playing there now at Hanoi Rock City.
The Vietnamese scene, the music has changed so much. Like you remember back in the day, most of the time the Vietnamese people play is rock music. Right? 13 years ago, you barely see, there's hip hop and rap, right?
Yeah.
But you wouldn't see any electronic stuff. you don't see too much beatboxing, or you wouldn't have like alternative rock, or a little bit poppy, Britpop, or some jazz fusion kind of stuff. But nowadays you have pretty much everything, thanks to the internet, the YouTube, the Spotify, and all the cracked version of Logic Pro at home. So everyone's a bedroom producer now, and it's so easy for people to make music. So I think it's brilliant, and kids are willing to try anything nowadays. It's brilliant. You see Vietnamese kid doing any random stuff that you can think of.
Yeah.
But not the case 10 years ago.
Right. And would you say, like, it's happened quite organically, though, the scene in Vietnam? Does it feel like it's come out of a place of authenticity?
It is, yeah.
Has it got its own sound going on and its own characteristics?
Ish, I would say. Because we're 100 years behind the world in terms of music. So let's not jump ahead of ourselves and say, oh, we create something very unique. Obviously, people, even like great artists in the world, are influenced by someone. But people have done something very interesting. The young kids are like winning. Even the musicality and the musicianship itself has been increasing so much. You have like, I play in a band where the drummer started performing with me since he was 14, and the kid is insanely talented. For example, you know what I mean? So you have way more options, and kids are way more exposed to many different genres of music.
Yeah. And what would you say indie music means to Vietnamese people?
Oh, now that is the big question, and I've been trying to putting the message out there to everyone all the time. But indie music to Vietnamese, the majority of Vietnamese music listener, I would say, is that the majority of them would identify indie music as someone who grab an acoustic guitar sitting at a coffee house and singing some love song kind of stuff. Where they don't, I mean, to be fair, it does have a logic to it, like why people would think that, because a lot of them started that way. But they did not understand that indie music is basically something that people created in their own parents' garage, you know what I mean? That if you write things yourself, you produce it yourself, you don't take the money from a label or a producer, and you don't do anything too financially like advertising with it, then it started off as indie music. You have indie rock, indie blues, indie metal, indie anything. It's basically just mean independent. But yeah, at the moment when someone hears something that's a tiny bit like, love song, and it has this acoustic vibe to it, and a bit something that's strange, then different from the mainstream commercial music, and they'd be like, oh, that's indie.
Right.
But I think, I wouldn't say it's too harmful, I would say.
And what are the young people in Hanoi's or Vietnam's indie scene or rock music scene, or, what are Vietnam's bands writing about these days?
Vietnamese language is very interesting, and there's so many things you can do with it. So I love the way people are using the language now to write stuff. Think of them as like they use a lot of, let's say, the equivalent of Cockney rhymes, rhyming slang, things like that. So it's super interesting, I would say. And to be fair, music, man, loads of them will be writing about love and, breakups and whatnot. There's a lot of them about that. But more interestingly would probably be the rappers. They would say more interesting thing, I think, maybe. Because to be fair, rap is like writing poems, and you have a lot more to say instead of, let's say, indie rock or indie pop. And most of them about, like, love song and breaks up and whatnot.
It's quite sentimental, isn't it? Like,
yeah,
music in Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
I always say Nhiều tình cảm.
Yeah.
Is that the right?
And you think exactly. Yeah, sentimental. Very.
Lots of love, lots of romance, and I wondered if there were like bands out there that like aren't talking about that stuff. You know, are they talking about like hard times? You know, like I guess you know, whether it's pandemics or global recessions, which I guess Vietnam isn't really feeling so much. Hardships, you know, like, is there anyone really talking about this stuff? Like life being difficult, or is it all quite romantic and mainly about love?
I would say we don't have that too much. We would have the people who is very sentimental and writing beautiful stuff, or the one who take it in the opposite direction, they're being very funny and like literally comedy and write about literally nothing. Then you would have those kind of, and mainly those are the pop punk, the metal, and the people who just go mental on stage and just scream about random funny stuff. But yeah, we don't really have anything too political, I'd say.
No.
Yeah.
And
it's difficult to sing about that too.
Yeah.
That's the problem that I have when I write songs as well.
Right.
Like, I cannot write them in Vietnamese because everything I write that is sentimental, it sounds cliche and stupid in my head. So I'm like, I cannot do that.
So what are you writing about?
So I would probably have to use English.
Right.
That I find it if I do, like, you know, sentimental love song in English, I have more words that I can use rather than all of, because I'm not good at Vietnamese either. But for example, Ngọt, right, the band like Thắng is, you've probably seen him 10 years ago. Yeah. You know Ngọt, right? Yeah. Back in the day, he's a great lyricist. Yeah. And the same with like Alex Turner, the way he used English and his accent to become super famous. Yeah, it's, I think, that does come out to the DNA a little. I'm not really good with that. Where there's some people who are so what do I say? It's very experimental and creative with the use of Vietnamese language.
I find that the rappers.
Yeah, the rapper is definitely the best people who's using the language right now.
Yeah. So some people find it kind of restricting and limiting, like yourself, and others are finding it like, as a real good creative way to play with language. Yeah.
That's just for me personally. Like, I don't know any cool words or cool ways to. To be fair, I've been using English as my main language to study and work for 22 years, so it's a bit limiting to
use Vietnamese, or
limiting to use Vietnamese if I want to do something, you know what I mean, like cool. Yeah. Because the only thing that I'm good with Vietnamese is like swearing and being funny, you know what I mean? So all the slangs and all the shitty thing that you say to each other. But when you start writing song, you're like, oh, I can't use that. Where are all the cool words? How do you rhyme with this, and how do you play with this thing? It's very difficult. Yeah.
So I guess is it because of the tones? Do you think, or is it
the tone make it? I think the tone makes it more flexible. It gives you more tools.
Right. So is it more like the vocabulary, the limited vocabulary?
For me, it's the vocabs. Yeah, for me, it's the vocabs. Because everything that I intend to say, it has been used for hundreds of years, all of the phrases, and I'm like, oh my God, I can't reuse the phrases. So
it just becomes tired.
Yeah. Cliche. But then there's some people just come up with some random shit, and you be like, oh, that works.
Yeah.
And for example, Thắng Ngọt, for example, I would rank him out of all the musicians right now, probably the best lyricist. Because what he say is what you would normally hear a normal person would say.
Right.
But you would never think, oh, that works as a song lyrics.
Right.
And then he would just come up with some very interesting word plays and things like that. And the rhyming is everything. It's beautiful. Yeah, the kids is very talented in terms of doing,
You mentioned Hang at Not.
Mm.
Are there any other musicians that you feel like are worth checking out, like for global audiences?
There's so many of them, but the one that let's say pulling the most crowd at the moment because of their production is getting very professional, and I don't know if they're indie anymore. It's the indie. It's very difficult by definition because you don't know when are you still indie and when you start, because some of the indie acts has been signed by labels. For example, you know Halle, right? The rappers that we hang out with for years, and he was signed to Sony, and he did some super cool stuff with renewing Trịnh Công Sơn music. So he put a completely different twist to it. And then you have Tai Vũ, who is a singer-songwriter. He was in the army. He's the definition of indie music. He was in the army, and during his breaks and whenever he have time, he just grab the guitar and write songs. It's, you know, the kind of Bob Dylan kind of vibe. Right. But now the production is insane, and he's signed by Warner Music, one of the biggest label in the world. So would you categorize him as indie anymore? I don't know, but then he would draw a huge crowd. Not obviously, I would say, up to this day, the most consistently in terms of musicality, quality, and the crowd that they pull. Recently, there's a band from Saigon as well, also signed by Warner, called Chili's. So they were all musicians who play music for a living in coffee house and bars and whatnot, which they get bored of every day. And then all 5 of them were like, let's do a project together. And then they created the band, and I think they've just sold out a stadium show a week ago or something.
In Vietnam?
In Vietnam, yeah. So they are as well, or a band called Cá Hồi Hoang, also from Saigon, and has been consistently for the past 5 years, I'd say, 5, 6 years. So the name I just told you, probably the top of the scene at the moment, who draw a big crowd with a super professional production, and they have been consistently on the top of the scene in the past, let's say, 6, 7 years. So you would have 2, 3 from Hanoi and 2, 3 from Saigon. Yeah. But there's so many super cool bands, and I mean, artistically, it will be very challenging to compare people, obviously. But that's super interesting project that probably only draw like 50 people, but still like super.
Yeah. Would you say that any of these bands are kind of having any like commercial collaborations? Like, you know, you start seeing them on like TV adverts.
Yeah, loads.
Really?
Loads. Because they signed to label now, so that's part of some of their project that they signed that they will do, which I'm very happy to, because at least kids in music now would see example of, this guy was in the army.
Yeah.
He had no musical training. He just sit there with the acoustic guitar and write song.
Yeah.
Look where he is now. I'm like, look at this guy. He used to play at HSE for like 500Ks a night, like Thang Ngọt and whatnot. And he kept grinding it for years, and now they sell like 6,000 tickets for their show. So, and then they appear on TV and whatnot, and people was like, oh my God, you're sold out, you're commercial and whatnot. But those are just kids. The people who give in those comments are just kids trying to be edgy. You know what I mean? You see all this YouTube video and be like, oh my God, Arctic Monkey is not what they used to be anymore. They sold out. And bruv, if Arctic Monkey made 6 bloody albums that sounds the same, would you go and be like, oh my God, it's so awesome? Like they are the same after 20 years. Like, no.
It does feel like I mean, that happens in every scene, right?
Yeah,
In
yeah.
every culture,
Yeah.
I think.
But you should be happy if people big enough and they can make money for themselves.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
It's like Stormzy as well in the UK.
Yeah, Stormzy, right.
Came from grime and,
Yeah.
and now is making commercial music.
I know, yeah. Yeah.
Is there any examples of bands in Vietnam that have got so big by themselves without a label, just using their social media channels?
I think, I hate to say it again, but Ngot is the only one. And Cao and Huang are the two biggest ones that are not signed to a label.
Right.
Yeah, so they're pretty much still DIY at the moment.
Yeah.
I don't know the reason behind it. There's so many reasons, but I mean, the fact is they are not.
Yeah.
Those are the two, one in Hanoi, one in Saigon, are the two bands that are still big and can draw a huge crowd, but not signed to a label yet.
I was going to ask you about Vietnam's nightlife scene and more so live music scene. How does that differ from Hanoi to Saigon and maybe anywhere in between?
Right. I might be wrong, and people from Hanoi and Saigon will hate me for this, but this is my personal experience for 13 years doing the nightlife. Vietnamese people differ so much from Hanoi to Saigon. Saigon people are way more happier and willing to party and go out and have fun, I think. And they will go out any day of the week, anytime. If you have a friend, you say, hey, you want to go grab a beer? And people are like, yeah. Hanoi people would be a bit more grumpy. They will go out less. They probably would drink less on average. And harder to please, complain a bit more. So that's the difference. That's why the nightlife in Saigon is way more places, way more money. And you know HRC, right? I live off of probably 2 nights a week max. Yeah. The rest of the week just being sitting there having fun doing nothing on his own. Because we don't go out that much during weekdays. So that's the difference. And even when we do go out, the Vietnamese young kids who like art and music, they don't drink. That's not in their blood. They're very healthy. You just go to HRC, have a bottle of Coke or just like still water and enjoy the gig and go home happy. Saigon people would definitely have a few beers in them. So it's way more easy, I would think, to do business with art and music in Saigon.
Commercially.
However, because of that, the artists in Saigon are much easier to make a living, I think. If you play as just a session musician at a coffee house, at the bar, you play covers, you make a living out of it. You can. Whereas it's way difficult to people in Hanoi to do that. Therefore, I think we have more original artists in Hanoi because it's difficult for them to make a living off of music. Hence, a lot of them have other jobs. And because they can't make a living out of music, they might as well write to themselves, for themselves, and they don't give a shit about the crowd. So it probably offers more original artists and more original material in Hanoi than Saigon. And there were a few bands in Saigon that get very famous and whatnot, but it takes them so long to write more materials because they're too busy touring and playing and, making money and whatnot. Which you can't. Well, if you cannot do it, then you might have to sit down and write more stuff. I mean, sometime in Saigon, you might lose track in terms of making that you can make money off of it. Yeah. So you don't do something that it's too crazy, too out of the ordinary, because you can make comfortable money doing this way. Whereas in Hanoi, you would have some widows like Golim 12 years ago doing some weird stuff, and because they couldn't care, and that is not their job at all.
I'm glad you mentioned Golim.
Yeah.
They were a special band, right?
I know.
How would you describe Golim?
I went on the internet 13 years, and I would just randomly search like band in Vietnam, and they were not called Golim. They were called Golem, as in Golem, with an E, Golem,
Right.
Golem. And they were 5 girls who played covers. That's it.
I see.
So they were jumping around playing covers randomly at prom, like student party. And
So what happened?
I don't know. So Chang Choi was there, right? Chang and Mi Biao and all that. And I think Nga Nhi started joining them.
Right.
You remember Nga, right?
Yeah.
She sadly passed away. It was a huge loss. But she started in there, and I think she made quite influential in the way that, again, she's a great lyricist, and she's experimental. It just come up with some weird stuff.
Yeah.
And then that's when they start writing original, like Người đàn bà làm đầu. Like, what is that song?
Yeah. What does that mean, that title?
Người đàn bà làm đầu is in the woman who's having washing her hair, things like that.
Right,
Or
right.
các bạn đừng nghiêm, like the thing that we do, các bạn đừng nghiêm is like me as head of the class. I have to shout that to my classmate every time we see teachers and whatnot. You like, stand still. That kind of.
Right.
So who sings about that? Like 12 years, 13 years ago, they was. I would call them probably the first Vietnamese indie band in the sense of indie itself.
Right.
Like Blur. They have that Blur vibe, I think.
So you feel like that could have come from having space to create and also not really writing for an audience, like commercially. Just
Definitely
write
not.
whatever you want to write.
Yeah. I mean, even if they live until this day, they would never be able to do it commercial, man. Definitely not. I mean, obviously, maybe
Like they would have got
enough,
some-
to make a living and get a 200, 300 crowd at HRC now and again. But I wouldn't. I don't think they care enough to.
Is their music available anywhere?
Spotify, I think they have their CD. If you ask Chang Choi, she would probably have it.
Yeah.
I did ask Sun Lan, the original drummer, to give me the drawing that she did for the album, Gỗ Lim's album in the first place, the first one. So everyone's doing different job now. I think Chang is the only one who's still doing music with Lamb Box and Windrunner. There's a lot of cool projects.
Yeah. Would you say there's anyone doing that kind of Go Lim stuff like today in Vietnam?
A bit more metal and a bit funnier, and it might be a bit more explicit. Probably Good Lord, for example. Or in Saigon, you would have 7 Uppercuts. Or that's what there would be pop punk. People who sing about random stuff that could be funny and whatnot. Yeah, but I would say they're a bit more heavier than Gỗ Lim. Gỗ Lim was like very sort of funky. Dang, 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 dang. That's super cool, yeah. Man, that project was so cool.
Yeah.
But like you remember, none of the Vietnamese know who they were back then. Nobody likes that kind of stuff. Now you have some young kids and be like, oh, listen to that, even though the band is no longer. But back in those days, mainly the expat who appreciate their music, and they did not understand a word.
Yeah.
But it was amazing for me to witness that. I sitting out in the South booth and like, what are you singing about? And that riffs is awesome, Like Chang Choi would come up with some random riffs, and it's so cool.
Yeah.
And Nga Nhi stage present, man, because she's an artist, man. She doesn't care. She sings about anything, and she screams.
Yeah.
She's not a singer. I don't think she's a singer at all. They just read, talk, scream. But I think that's what's beautiful about them.
I feel like this scene, I mean, I'm not obviously as involved in it at all, let alone
As
have
you
as much as
used
you
to.
are. Well, I feel like kind of missing that a little bit.
Yeah.
That kind of,
Yeah.
that raw art.
Yeah, very raw art, to be fair, yeah. But now you see there's a lot of very cool stuff as well, but definitely more polish. I think because of everything is quite available for you to do at home and whatnot, so you can. But if you come on Wednesday, you will still see like high school bands coming to HRC on the open mic and doing some badly original and covers that they do, which I love seeing. Because one day, one of them would be big, who knows? Yeah. But you see the potential.
12 years of Hanoi Rock City, into your 13th year.
Yes.
Can you remember some of your biggest and favourite events?
Ooh, there's so many of them.
Yeah, I bet.
There's so many of them. But I would say, if I have to pick one, then it would definitely be the 10th birthday. It's insane in terms of not only because it's 10 years, not just because it's an amazing entire week of Vietnamese and expats and everything that's going together for 10 years and all the crowds going mental and everyone just sending love from all over the world. Not because of all of that, but 2 bloody weeks before it started, there were 2 positive cases in Saigon. And that entire year, every day I was living in fear. Because you never know if they make me close down the next day, how I'm gonna pay the rent. And it's been non-profit for 13 years. He's living on his own without COVID, obviously. Then it pays the staff and pay the rent and everybody. And I have a pretty decent job, so I'm happy with it. But that year, man, I have never felt that happy after an entire month of December. We have about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, about 8 or 9 events the entire month, about 50 to 60 artists, both Vietnamese and expat. You have all the weird stuff, or even the hip-hop, the metal, the reggae people and metal. Everybody goes together for 1 month, and when it ends, I'm like, today is the day that any other day of HRC is just a bonus for me. Right. I just felt I've done it. For 10 years, I kept this place bloody alive. And the entire month of it happening, I was just waiting for a call to shut down at any point. I'm like, what am I going to do now? Cancel the whole thing? It's 10 years birthday, man. It means something. And I was like, yeah, if I have to pick one, then it's definitely that. Yeah. It's crazy.
Yeah. I guess the next big milestone is 15 years.
Yeah.
Which isn't that far away.
It's not far away. It's 13 now.
Have you got any sort of new plans or major plans for Hanoi Rock City?
We are always there to provide a platform for people, and we will always be. What we do on the side, if we can, that'd be awesome. But I think a city would always need a couple of HRC of that size, of that 300-400 people, so that bands can grow from there. So I mean, what I see is that we would really want to make more money so that the stage lighting, sound, and everything will be more and more professional by day, so that whoever comes on that stage be like, oh my God, I have 20 people in the crowd, but I'm playing with this amazing professional system. So you get used to it, and the crowd would get used to the quality, and in general, the whole scene would definitely be huge itself. But what I really want to see, and hopefully can do, is to educate the scene in a way that we can do more exchange of music and art internationally. Because now, it doesn't matter how big you are in Vietnam. If you play somewhere else in the world, there are 2 scenarios. Number 1 is the Vietnamese in that country who booked you to come over. Or it's a cultural exchange between two countries, meaning the crowd there have no idea who you are, and they couldn't care less about you. But you play anyway, even though when you play, they would like it. No doubt. They could. But the reason you're there is not because of you. Is not because of the crowd's demand. Whereas Thailand has done it, like, or Korea, like all of the neighboring country, you would have touring artists. Taiwan, you have like, Sunset Roller Coaster, you would have Hyogo, you would have like Phum in Thailand. That when they touring in other country, they were there because of the demand of the crowd, which the Vietnamese music scene haven't got yet. And I would always tell them, I mean, this is like a long way to go, but if you want to do that, you definitely have to write in English.
Right.
There's no other way. No one in Thailand would listen to a Vietnamese artist. I mean, if you have 3 Vietnamese songs and 2 English songs, then they would definitely probably listen to all of them.
Maybe like a bilingual.
Yeah. But if you do all 5 in Vietnamese, then they wouldn't have any motivation to listen to you in the first place. It's very difficult, unless you're an instrumental band where you only play music, nothing else. Then sure, it's an international language. So that's one thing, is to somehow encourage and see the kids could actually go abroad by demand. Because I have a lot of friends who are doing festival overseas in Thailand, Taiwan, and they would definitely host a Vietnamese band, fly 4 people over and play something easy.
Yeah.
But you're not there because the crowd wants you. And that's what hopefully can be changed in the next 10, 20 years.
Yeah.
And secondly, people need to experiment more. Like even Saigon or Hanoi both have this bad habit. I wouldn't say bad, but I mean, people like their comfort zone, and they probably are not as passionate as about music as you and I. But people would never try something new. It's very difficult for me to run a venue where all the crowd wants is all of this big name over and over again. That's not logical. And I don't want huge people. But if every time I book a new artist, 50 or 100 people will come and check them out, whether you like them or not, it would be cool to keep a place alive, because you cannot have all of them successful. Out of the 20 people that I try to book and support them over the year, there may be only one that becomes famous and do really good music. 19 would fail and come back to their day job. And in the world, that ratio is even higher. Right? Yeah. It could be 1 out of 100, 1,000 in the UK. But like, if you don't go and I haven't listened to this band, let's see what happens. Yeah. And if you don't come to see those, then how do we have the money to finance and run the place to support that band that you like, if you only want me to book that band all over and again? Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. So that's what we need to educate, is that there are cool music everywhere. If you listen to it and you appreciate what people write and do, then there are cool side of music everywhere in the world. And please have this sort of mentality where you would support new people and would willing to try something new, even though 15 minutes in you're like, this is shite, I'm gonna go have a beer. That's completely fine, but you go have a beer and be like, the next band might be better, and you would check them out. That becomes one of your habit, and it will be easier for me to book international artists, because I cannot book bloody Arctic Monkeys, but I can book Arctic Monkeys in 2005. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I can book a band in Taiwan or Thailand or in Korea, everything, when they are not huge yet. Yeah. But they are good. They would willing to come here for food and hotel and probably $500.
But you need people to turn up.
But you gotta turn up and trust me in terms of, these bands are good. Let's see what they're like, and check them out. But now if I book a band that I really like from Taiwan, probably like 30 people turn up, and I would lose money, and that would definitely not encouraged me to introduce more cool music to the scene. And I cannot complain about that because, you know, Vietnam, we only cares about music and art recently. After the war, we've been worrying about food and shelter for our entire life. Who cares about that? So all we need is time. But every time anyone who asks me now or interview me, or that's the message that I want to send out, is that music and arts are cool, and you can find the good things, the thing that you like from different people, different artists, but you just have to try. Yeah.
So will you be curating this still going forward, or are you going to like look to pass it on to somebody? You know?
I am mainly just most of the time pointing fingers now, because I have a very cool teams of kids from 2019. My youngest staff is 2004. That's 19 to 96. That's 27. So they would take care of everything once I pass it on to them. Obviously, I would make the initiative to do things and tell them what to do. But they comes up with loads of things that definitely, I mean, I want to pass it on to them because I'm 40 now. Like all of the things the young kids related to and that they want to do, or the meme you post on your page so that kids will relate and come to your show. I can't do any of that. So I'm just like, oh, this band is cool. Check them out. I'll give them a message. And if they're interested, can you guys like talk to them and see if we can put them on? So yeah, it's just directing.
Nice.
But yeah, super talented team.
Yeah. I try and end these podcasts by asking you if there's anything you're quite excited about for Vietnam's future.
For Vietnam future.
Not necessarily within music, could be within music, rock music or whatever.
Well, I don't care much about anything else aside from music. So, yeah, like I said, like I see Vietnamese musician winning international prizes.
Yeah.
That proves that the musicality and musicianship, we are not inferior to the world anymore. You have kids who are winning like international drum challenge, like proper international drum challenge. You have, I know about 4 kids now who having scholarship at Berklee College of Music in the US, and they would become probably, because they're only like 23, 22. So they would be the one who is shining the torch for the Vietnamese music scene later on. I've been to festival around the world, and I know that we can provide the stage and the sound and the lighting quality just as good. I mean, obviously we have the equipment, but if you have the money, we can provide them. But, you know, back in the day, we don't have them if you want. Yeah. Doesn't matter how much money you have. You don't have this kind of speakers or this lighting features and whatnot. We just simply don't. But nowadays, you see that, you be like, so anyone in the world, anywhere in the world, we have the musician to do and play super cool stuff. And we have the station, the lighting and whatever. Yeah. But what we need is time for people, the creativity to flow in and write more stuff. And the crowd, the young kids who are growing up now. My kids, I teach at school, are slowly growing up. Like Arctic Monkey plays in Bangkok, and there's like 100 Vietnamese that I know fly to Bangkok to see Arctic Monkeys. How many you would see if it happened 12 years ago? I don't think any Vietnamese would fly to Bangkok to listen to Arctic Monkeys. They don't even know who they were, let alone, you know what I mean? But like the culture of going abroad to see music or going to gigs and concert and festival is growing. So I'm sure we have all the necessary ingredients for a very bright future of music. And I'm really looking forward to it for the young kids to go mental and recognize internationally. Yeah. That's the dream.
You've been listening to You Don't Know Vietnam. I'm Ian Payton from We Create Content. I'd like to thank DJ Jase from the Beats Saigon for the soundtrack, and to you for making it all the way to the end.